Hello, and welcome to Longwood GradCast Beyond the Degree. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Tanner Anderson, Assistant Dean of the College of Graduate and Professional Studies. This season, we're exploring one big question: how did you get here? Join us as we uncover the inspiring, winding, and sometimes unexpected paths of Longwood University's graduate alumni, students, and faculty. Whether you're dreaming of your next step, reflecting on your journey, or just curious about the stories behind remarkable success, this podcast is your inside look at the transformative power of education, determination, and the Longwood spirit. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Longwood GradCast Beyond the Degree. This season, we're exploring one question: how did you get here? And I'm thrilled today to welcome our next guest for season 2, Travis Mason. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Sarah. This is such a fun idea and such a fun concept. I'm so happy to be a part of it and appreciate you having me.
Well, absolutely. And I'm so excited to hear about your pathway. So, Travis, can you share with us a little bit about your journey from being an ambulance paramedic to being a helicopter flight paramedic while obtaining your MBA to now being a director of sales for the entire Northeast region in the U.S.? I mean, I need to know more. How did you get here?
Yeah, so definitely was not a linear path. Thinking about the timeline that I was on, I started EMS when I was in high school. It was something that I had admired and always wanted to do. Back to when I was like going to preschool, I would throw a fit if my mom didn't drive me past the fire station. So it had always been like just in my heart, like I really need to do this. Fast forward a couple years, I've started the EMS education, went to paramedic school right out of high school, night shift in the city of Richmond for 5 years, and ultimately found myself relocating from Richmond to Farmville, and stayed on the path for wanting to eventually get into aeromedical, helicopter EMS, if you will. And once I got to Farmville, I didn't realize it at the time, but it was going to open up a lot of doors for me. Ironically, you would think being in a more urban, more dense part of the state, like that's where the opportunity would lie. But it actually was here in Farmville, ironically. So being here, I got to meet not only Dr. Perry with the Longwood Graduate School, but also make connections with the health system here, Centra, and that broadened my reach out towards the Roanoke area, down towards Durham, North Carolina, and so on. So I always had my eyes set on being the best paramedic I could be, getting to the top of the pyramid, so to speak, which to me was the pinnacle of the career, is to get on the helicopter and be a flight medic. With that came the biggest deficit that I saw in myself was the lack of formal education. Paramedic school traditionally is not a college degree. It's only lately become recognized at the associate's level across the community college system, but it's definitely unpopular to find an undergraduate level program. I was lucky enough to what used to be known as Jefferson College of Health Sciences, and now Radford University Carilion. They had a degree pathway for paramedics that had the education, but not the degree. I enrolled in that, got my bachelor's, and was ready to go. From there, I fired up the resume and just started applying for flight jobs left and right. The experience of interviewing over and over again and not being selected just had me like constantly going back and saying, like, what is it? Is it me? Is it the resume? Is it the lack of experience? Like, what are the deficits here? And not only what are the deficits, but okay, like I've made it this far. I'm applying for the flight jobs, but like, what's next? Where does this go? Because there's got to be a pathway, right? So ultimately where it led was I landed the flight position, no pun intended, and got to work for an outstanding academic university-based program that taught me more than, I'm sure you've heard the phrase, you don't know what you don't know. And boy, I had no idea what I didn't know. The learning was insane. And it coincided with the COVID pandemic. So not only was I experiencing new clinical modalities that I hadn't been exposed to before, but it was also just a total shift in culture and how we interact with people and patients and things like that. To fast forward to the MBA program, I find myself kind of revisiting that idea of, okay, like I've got the flight job, but where do I go from here? Do I want to go to leadership? Do I want to go to sales? Do I want to go somewhere else entirely? Maybe consulting? I had no idea. And I mentioned a moment ago, moving to Farmville opened up the ability to interact with Dr. Perry. And through Janine, I got to meet Jamie and a handful of others that worked in the graduate and professional studies office. one thing led to another, and I decided, somewhat on a whim, as I do, that, you know what, it's time for a master's degree. And through luck, happenstance, networking, whatever the case was, I was able to be accepted into the Longwood MBA program and did that largely around COVID. And here we are today. It's 2025, and it's opened so many doors for me that, I don't know, the appreciation for that and for I guess just the opportunity that it's created is amazing.
Well, and I appreciate the fact that you give a little shout out to Dr. Perry because she is just tremendous as a human being. But I think a lot of people's pathways go back to that as an initiator. So whether it is that luck or happenstance, as you say, or just networking and getting to know the right people, I think it's a testament to what Longwood does and what our community does, that we see people tap their potential and get them excited to do something about it. So you mentioned your pathway up to the MBA and having you here and exploring the academic pathways you've been looking for. How did you balance that grad school experience with a full-time career? So you were doing both, a full-time career as a helicopter flight paramedic.
I was very fortunate. So the nature of the work is shift work, as most of healthcare is. Where I was working at the time, I was working 24-hour long shifts, but only twice a week. So I would go to work, I would be dialed in and focused there. And a lot of days we were busy. It was skids up to skids down. We never saw the base, one flight after another, just moving patients across the state. But what that also gave me was usually 4 to 5 days off a week to fulfill the other things that I had going on in my life, largely at the time, grad school. It was uninterrupted, phone wasn't ringing, no other obligations, able to sit down, focus, and knock it out. I was really fortunate to have that type of schedule.
But on top of all of that, you were also a graduate assistant, correct?
Yeah, I was. Uh,
How do you manage all those things on top of everything else?
well, I don't know. Some of the people I was fortunate to work with were very patient with me. They had a lot of grace and a lot of give and understood that there was other things going on in my life at the time. But at the end of the day, we got it done. The biggest project that I got to work on, which I still look back on and smile about, was getting to redesign and rebuild the graduate professional studies website and kind of be the architect of that. Graphic design, user interface, like stuff like that is not a career. It's not even a side gig for me, but it is a passion. I love the getting to make something friendly and appealing and inviting, and to be able to do that for the grad school that was giving me the opportunity was so rewarding. Not only that, but I got to work with awesome people the whole way. The balance aspect, it was just time management, I guess, is what it ultimately boiled down to. But with the immense amount of patience that the marketing team and within the grad school had with me is what ultimately made it successful.
And I would just have to say that the marketing team continues to be just wonderfully supportive of all of our graduate program directors, me included, and we adore our marketing team. And certainly appreciate the work that you did with the website, being innovative and recognizing too that even if it's not something that's directly related to your degree pathway, it's an opportunity for you to engage in some passion projects and do the things that you think are really interesting that might not necessarily be 100% as a result of your career or academic path, but still hugely valuable skills. So we definitely appreciate that. So I guess I'm also interested in how your MBA experience, you've talked a little bit about serving as a GA and how you were working full time. How did your MBA in particular help shape your leadership and your decision-making skills and your fast-paced world, right? All that you're doing with aeromedical services. How did your MBA help prepare you for that?
Yeah. So one of the things that really was an experience to the MBA program that I won't say I wasn't used to it, but just hadn't experienced it in such a way that it was delivered through the program, was the real-time, like, critical feedback that was given from the faculty. As a paramedic, like, my entire role is being independent in the back of an ambulance with a patient and making decisions on the fly. And usually never receiving feedback for weeks to months later about, hey, did you think about this or that or whatever? But, it's kind of for the first time in my professional journey that I was put on the spot, for the most part in real time, about the way that I was thinking about things or framing a question or writing an answer. And that challenge paid off in how I push my team today. I think people thrive on feedback. I think that if framed correctly and delivered appropriately, good feedback, whether it's positive or negative, will really push a team forward and push people to grow professionally. When I took over the role, I inherited 8 account managers that we work with throughout the region and had to get to know personalities and customers and challenges and things like that. And I had one that really stood out as he just kind of liked to float along. It wasn't really his thing to go out and push and to want to move the needle, so to speak. I took part of my experience with the MBA program of thriving on that feedback. You take it in at first and you're like, wow, that's kind of harsh. But then the product on the other end of the equation is so valuable. So I've gotten to watch him grow and develop into a leader within his program in a pretty short amount of time. And so I just use that experience to reinforce that the feedback given is ultimately one of my biggest takeaways.
Well, that's fantastic. And to hear that experience in real life. So taking what you've learned in your academic program and being able to translate that in real time to help others, I think that's huge. So if you could go back and give yourself some advice, your first day in the MBA program, what advice might you give the Travis Mason of yesteryear? And you mentioned the feedback lesson, but are there any other lessons or skills from the MBA that you continue to use today?
If I could go back to day one of the first semester and look myself right in the eyes and say, like, you need to know this, it's slow down. For years, I've just had my foot on the gas, all gas, no brakes, just take it one day at a time and just move through life as quick as possible. And I don't have any regrets, I'm happy to say. But at the same time, I think I probably tried to speed that process up too much to the point where I missed out on some opportunities that were probably going to come my way had I just slowed down and zoomed out a little bit.
I think that's excellent advice. And I think that's something that would speak to a lot of our listeners. I think often the day-to-day, and I mentioned earlier today, I feel like I'm in constant triage mode. And so how do you take a moment and just enjoy the process and be present within it, gleaning all the things that you can learn along the way? So thank you for sharing that. I think that's excellent advice. All right, so shifting gears just a little bit, because your career now has evolved from that hands-on emergency medicine now to leadership. Was that really always your plan, or did it just surprise you, that pathway?
Yes and yes. So I think that I've always had a leadership mentality. And I think that goes back to just being a paramedic. Every time I would show up to somebody's house or a car wreck scene or whatever the case may be, like, I was in charge. And the risk of sounding arrogant, like when I spoke, people listened. And it's such a great feeling to have, like, the trust of those around you that you're the expert in the room. And I would thrive on that. So every time I would start into a new position or a new role, it was always taking a back seat, getting to learn from those around me and being the listener in the room instead of the leader in the room. Ultimately, I wanted to progress to a point where I found myself back in that leadership position. When I got the MBA, or when I graduated, rather, it's not like I just went to Walmart and bought it, but when I graduated and earned it, I had this moment at the time of MBAs don't typically fit into emergency medical. It's not, at least in my opinion at the time, it's not the typical career path. What do I do with 12 years of patient care experience now with a business degree? Like, that's a weird intersection. So I actually took a gap year from patient care and went to work for a software company doing account management in a work from home capacity, and learned very quickly that software account management was absolutely not a passion of mine. And as I spoke to about the website, like, I got really involved with that because it was a passion of mine. And if I'm going to excel in my work, I have to really care about it. So went back and was actually able to leverage the MBA with the patient care experience and go into a management position with the company that I'm in now. So that first step back into the emergency medical aviation world was as an operations manager. And so I oversaw 5 helicopter bases where the pilots, the mechanics, the medics, and the nurses, they reported up through me. And I was their, like, day-to-day, like, manager, director equivalent. My current position that I'm in now was a promotion. I think it was like 13 or 14 months into the operations management. I got the opportunity to promote to a director level position overseeing the sales team for the Northeast region. And promotions are great. I love the idea of climbing the ladder. I love the different things I would learn and gain from that. But ultimately I had to take a step back and take a deep breath and think like sales. Like in my core, I have like moral objections rather to like selling healthcare. Another discussion for another day, but that's kind of the thought process I had is like, how do I align with this type of position? And how do I, 10 years from now, when I look back, am I going to agree with this decision? The more I learned about it, the more I was able to come to terms with that and ultimately find myself in this position now. And I think perhaps sales is maybe not the finest term we could pick for this type of position, but it's really being solutions oriented. And my role in this is to find ways to serve more patients and to open up the doors in rural areas for patients to get moved to the high value tertiary care that they deserve. So I don't know that I answered your question. I'm not sure. I kind of got off on a little bit of a tangent there and sorry for being long winded, but did that answer your question?
I think it did. And I think to just really piggyback on some of the ideas that you shared. So your role now, I mean, of course, it's something that you didn't ultimately believe this sign me up for this. My pathway has taken me to this thing, but through experiences and promotions and whatnot, you've really found yourself in an interesting leadership position and one that you might not have essentially sought out, but one that you're able to really impact some incredible change. And so I think from what you shared, just kind of gleaning your experiences from your MBA, also kind of coupled with your experiences with emergency medicine, you've got this real interesting sort of opportunity to do some good in your work. And so you mentioned something that I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, and maybe I'm kind of filling in gaps, but a misconception of sales or a misconception of the work that you do, perhaps in the air industry. What do you wish more people understood about the work that you do in any of those roles as you found yourself in this leadership position?
Yeah, no, that's such a good question. And one that I wish that I could like stand on the highest mountain in the world and scream from the top is that at the end of the day, when you have for-profit healthcare systems, you have private equity buying out organizations that are at one point thought to be completely patient-centric, and you hear these horror stories about people losing their homes and going hungry and being homeless because of medical bills. One thing that I'm very proud of in my work is that I get to be not only driving our business forward, but at the same time, like 50% of my work is being a patient advocate as well, and making sure that our patients that we touch and that we impact aren't going to collections, they aren't going homeless, and that we have a really in-depth and comprehensive payer strategy so that insurance companies that are supposed to be representing these patients, they get the burden. We're paid a fair market value, insurance takes the burden, the patient is left out of it. At the end of the day, if your family member, your loved one had a bad accident and they had to be flown to the trauma center an hour away, the last thing you want while you're trying to heal and return your family back to normal is a mountain of debt. And through the No Surprises Act, which was passed by Congress a few years ago, and our strategies that we as an air medical provider have implemented, I'm just so proud to talk about like our patients don't have that burden.
I think that's phenomenal. And I think it doesn't necessarily speak to just one specific instance that reminds you how much you love this career, this field that you're in, but many. The fact that you take the burden off of so many and that your advocacy and the work that you do in your leadership position is really good work that benefits a greater good, it benefits a larger community. But knowing that there are good people out there doing the hard work for advocacy, I think is just tremendous, and particularly in a field that probably isn't on everyone's radar until it is. And then you've got a stack of debt and you don't know what to do. And so I think that's really an amazing story. So thank you for that advocacy and for that work that you continue to do across your leadership.
Thank you.
So I guess changing gears again, because you just have such a tremendous story. I love it. But so you in air medical services, you mentioned that often it wasn't out of arrogance, but it's because things happen. They happen quickly. You're in charge. People do what you ask them to do because it's life or death experiences. So what leadership lessons from that real high pressure environment have you been able to take and translate into business management?
To me, the biggest lesson that I can take from my field experience as a medic to what I do now is that following instinct is often the right path. When you have a patient who's very sick or very injured in front of you, there's not any time to sit there and flip through the book, to phone a friend, ask ChatGPT what the right answer is. You fall back on your training, you make a decision, and you go with it. and you monitor the outcomes and you adjust. I think that pulling that out and into the role that I do now, there's a million ways to be paralyzed by all the different data and the dashboards and Power BI and Tableau and all these different resources that we have to help us make these most informed decisions. But I think like pulling it back, getting back to the basics, trusting our instincts. You have a problem, you make a decision. Watch how that decision plays out, pull in those you need, lean on your resources, and then press forward.
I think that's excellent advice. And I think all of us often find ourselves in situations where if there's an immediate need or an immediate decision that needs to be made, sometimes you just have to go with it. But recognizing that you've been trained and falling back on your training and your preparation, and innately you know what to do. And so I think that's an excellent connection there. So I'm wondering if you might consider a time that you've had to make a really difficult leadership decision in your field. And what did you learn from it? And what did you hope the other people involved may have learned from it?
I think a key area to running a team is to make sure that, for instance, I'm the coach for a sports team now. If I look at my bench, is every player on that bench exactly who I want? Just because the quarterback can throw the ball perfectly a million times in a row doesn't mean that the receiver is going to catch it just as many. When I look at my team, does every person on that bench, are they in the seat they need to be in? Do I have the dream team? Or do I need to make changes? That is the most impactful decision, I think, as a leader that I've had to make, is making adjustments to the team so that I know I have my A team. You start disrupting people's lives, you start disrupting relationships, but ultimately to build the A team, tough decisions have to be made.
I couldn't agree more. So what advice then would you give to someone who might be stepping into a leadership role for the first time, possibly in a high pressure industry, and making that A team? What advice might you give someone in that situation?
Trust your instinct. You know what you need. Go out and get it.
I love that. I feel like we need that on a t-shirt. Thank you for it. All right. So you mentioned getting a team together, getting people, you might be disrupting lives, you might be disrupting career pathways and trajectories, all these different things. But how do you work to support, I guess, really foster and then support a strong culture of trust and accountability, all while still maintaining integrity and ensuring safety, encouraging growth and accountability, all those things? How do you manage all those things as a leader?
You just identified like all of my favorite like leadership teamwork buzzwords all in one sentence, and I love that. So the last comment I made alludes to like, if you don't like somebody on your team, then just get rid of them. And that's not the case, right? Like building an A team doesn't mean that everyone starts out at 100% right out of the gate. I think that there's so much value in finding those that are worth building up and they're worth hanging on to for one reason or another. At the top of this podcast, when we started, I talked about building one of the members of my team that I have now. And it's been such a rewarding experience to watch him grow. The best part for me was that he doesn't have a lot of industry background or experience, but what he does have is he cares. He gives a you-know-what about his job and about his customer and about the patients that we're impacting. And for somebody that's willing to show up, get beat up a little bit by tough conversations, and then dust it off and get back up and keep going and want to go at it again and get stronger, that's an A-team player. I think that accountability is a great thing. I think that building trust is a great thing. And building those teammates up that deserve that level of attention is crucial to building a team. I think that seeps out into how others perceive you as a leader as well. They see you as somebody that's willing to coach and mentor and build rather than just make snap decisions about removing players. But I think that it's a two-way street as well, right? Like accountability and trust doesn't flow one way. I don't expect to walk into a room and just because I'm the new boss in town means that everybody automatically respects and trusts me. I've got to earn that. I've got to show them that I'm accountable to them just as much as I need them to be accountable to me. I love going back to like sports references. I think it's relatable to a lot of people. It's a coach walks into a room or goes into the locker room at halftime and the team's down. Like the team expects the coach to step up and correct the course. The team actually has to go out on the field and make the plays. Like they're responsible for finishing this game and winning. But they're not going to do it on their own without a coach that's willing to accept responsibility and be held accountable just as much.
I love a good sports reference as well.
Don't we all?
So the whole time you're talking, I'm just thinking Ted Lasso style, like what can we do in the locker room to turn this game around? I love it though. And there you go. All right. So I do not know anything about this field, which is why it excites me so much to think a little bit more about just the innovation and the technology connections with the air medical industry. And so if you could just take a couple minutes, share with our listeners how perhaps the air medical industry is evolving and where you might see some big opportunities for improvement or growth in your industry.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I love that. So the cornerstone of everything that air medical touches is safety. Safety is part of our decision matrix at every leg of the mission. And before the phone ever rings, it's part of walking in the front door of the base. Our mantra is that everyone goes home. And what that means is that the pilots, the mechanics, the medics, the nurses, like if we're not walking out and going home to our families at night, then we've really messed up. And there's no sense in even starting the day if our goal is not to go home at the end. So with that in mind, air medical has been relatively slow to evolve over the years. I'm sure everybody knows about drones now and all sorts of unmanned aircraft systems, but also at the front of everyone's mind right now is the safety of aviation with the changes we've seen out of air traffic control, the FAA, and things of that nature. I think it's important for everybody to understand that the aircraft that are built to move patients aren't just your everyday hobby level helicopters. These are military grade, multi-million dollar machines that are taken care of and maintained better than anything else in the world. Strict guidance and guidelines that we have to adhere to be safe to fly. With that, there's a human factor. Of course, accidents do happen, but we're very proud of a largely accident-free record that proves that our patients are safe with us. With that, to fly safe, every mission that we go on, we have multiple GPS systems in the aircraft that track other aircraft around us, altitude, attitude, speed indicators, and all the sorts. In addition to that, every aircraft has multiple sets of night vision goggles. The medical crews are also trained to wear NVGs at night so that we're never flying in the blind or with unknown objects around us. Really helpful, especially in rural areas where there's low light situations. It helps us see the trees and power lines and such. Looking ahead into the future, patient care technology has continued to evolve, but you can only fit so much into a small aircraft. So we're limited on what we can carry, but the mechanical ventilation, the IV infusion pumps, the cardiac monitoring is the exact same you would find in any ICU hospital room in the country. So they're flying ICUs, but even more than that, we're starting to get into developing systems that allow for a remote control of the aircraft and not to replace what the pilot does, which is so critical to everything that we do. But if a pilot were to become incapacitated or there was some other safety situation or unsafe situation, it would allow for our control center to take over controls of the aircraft and ultimately get everybody safely on the ground. I don't want to speak too much on that topic because there's been no firm rollouts of that or FAA approvals or anything of that nature. But I think it's something to look forward to where there's extra layers of safety, extra layers of oversight that ultimately bring everyone home.
Well, I think that's incredible too. And you mentioned, so one of my questions was going to be, a little bit about these emerging technologies. You mentioned drones, you mentioned the way that technology might be shifting within the aircrafts to better support safety and things like that. So it seems as though technology continues to advance exponentially, though probably over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll continue to see the increase in innovation. But I love that you mentioned that safety piece and how incredibly important it is for everyone to get home each day. I think that's a tremendous goal. And it seems like everything that you've shared really kind of goes back to the safety and well-being, not just of your patients, those being transported, but of those who are engaged in the work. That's fantastic. So I'm wondering if you had unlimited resources, because you mentioned these machines are multi-million dollar machines. So if you had unlimited resources, Travis, what might be a change or an innovation that you would implement in the air medical industry? If you had all the money in the world tomorrow, what would that be?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Man, you don't know what you don't know. What might be out there and available? I think if I had all the resources and the money in the world, what would I do for air medical? I think without time, money, or manpower being a consideration, I think mine is twofold, right? Like our patients are getting sicker, our ranges that we fly people are getting longer. I think developing a cost-effective platform that combined the ability for multiple clinicians to be in the cabin. So in addition to our standard paramedic nurse configuration, having 2, 3, 4 extra if we wanted to, with safe seats all around the patient if we needed to. I think developing a cabin of that size that was cost effective would be my ultimate goal. And with that, the reason behind that is I think that one of the things the biggest benefits of air medical is time. From Farmville, if I have a very sick patient that needs to go to Richmond or to Charlottesville or wherever for higher level of care, that's hour, 2 hours, 3 hours by ground, depending on the situation. But going by air, now we're looking at maybe 20 minutes. I think the ability to bring more services directly to the patient instead of bringing the patient to the services is ultimately where I would like to see this industry go.
I think that's fantastic. And someone who has grown up and worked and lived in a rural area most of my life, I think you're right that time piece, it's a struggle. By car to get to places where you need the care, it takes a long time. And so having that ability, and also, like you said, perhaps expanding the services even within the cabin, so you've got more supports in flight. I think that's a fantastic idea. If I had all the money in the world, I would donate to your cause today so that you can make it better tomorrow, Travis, because I think that would be fantastic. All right. So now let's think a little bit about where you're going next. When you think about all these learning challenges, these leadership opportunities, all these things that you've encountered over the past many years, who's been a mentor or a major influence for you in your career? And what's the best advice they ever gave you? And perhaps that's something that you've given to someone else.
So one of the biggest influences, and this has been pretty recent, I'll admit, is a man by the name of Rob Hamilton. He's the leader of the company that I work for and just kind of a titan in the air medical industry. The man's been there, done it. And coincidentally, I work for him now, but we actually grew up only minutes apart here in Central Virginia. So it's a cool story. But one of the things that Rob always says is be curious. And I think that, like, I might get a little emotional about this one. I just think that's such a powerful way to approach a situation is, in our field. And as we've talked about, it's be decisive, make a decision and run with it. I think that the different perspective that I need is to lead into situations with curiosity. And that's something that I'm trying to instill upon my team now currently as well. Is it's not always black and white. Like, let's really dig into this.
I think that's amazing advice that you both received and that you give. And I think to our listeners, perhaps our current students, your fellow alumni, our faculty and staff, anyone who takes a listen, I love the idea of remaining curious. I think that's what makes our world go round. That's what makes innovation happen. It's certainly what fills my cup, to learn new things, and sometimes not even knowing what it is to be curious about, but just being open to a possibility of learning something new from each exchange, from each experience. I think that's fantastic. So I'm wondering what you might share, Travis, with a Longwood alum who's thinking about a major career shift. You've experienced lots of transitions over the past number of years. So what advice might you give to someone who's facing kind of a fork in the road?
That's interesting. So it's funny. One of my friends called me last night about this exact situation. Facing a fork in the road, career decision. What do I do? What's your take? And we went through all the options. What were the pros here, the cons there, and so forth. And ultimately where I landed and what I told him, and I think I would tell to anybody else, is like, one, and this was the situation, right? It was like, one is like, I like what I do, the pay is good. And the other is, pay's not as good, but like it sets my soul on fire. And I was like, man, that's the obvious choice. Follow your passion. If it's just a job to you, then anybody could do it. Like, that's not for you. So that's what I would tell them.
I think you're absolutely right. If you can find something you're passionate about where it doesn't feel like a job, absolutely do it. And so if you were to be called back to teach a class here at Longwood, Travis, based on your experiences, all that you've learned, all that you've shared, what would the title of your class, what would it be called, housed in the registrar's office? Travis Mason is teaching what class?
Well, my favorite course in the MBA program was about data visualization, and I still use the lessons from that class like daily. But the phrase I used earlier, since we've been talking, Sarah, was don't be paralyzed by it. So I think it would be something to the effect of using data to make decisions, but don't get paralyzed by it, or something like that.
I love it. Sign me up, and also sign up all of our students, regardless of content area. It's a great hook. I love it. So sign me up. All right. So last question for you, because it has been amazing chatting with you today, Travis. If you were to describe your career journey in just 3 words, what would they be?
Fun, challenging, rewarding.
Fun, challenging, rewarding. And honestly, isn't that what we want for everyone in any career path that they choose?
I think so. I think I've struck gold with mine, so I love it.
Well, I love what you've been willing to share with us today, Travis. It has been an absolute joy to hear about your unique pathway. I've been fascinated by everything you've had to share today because it is so unlike anything I've ever done in my career path. And I'm so very thankful for people like you who keep us safe, who give us hope for a new day, that help people come home safely at the end of each day. And I just really appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Sarah. This has been so much fun. I'm so honored to get to go back to the alma mater and talk through this. And hopefully a student or alum will hear this and be inspired a little bit. But so much fun. And I just really appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Travis. And until next time, everyone, I can't wait to chat with you on GradCast Beyond the Degree. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Longwood GradCast Beyond the Degree. We hope today's story has left you inspired to reflect on your own path and the steps that brought you here. Remember, every journey starts with a single step, and we are here to support yours. Explore our graduate programs and professional endorsements at longwood.edu/grad programs. And stay tuned for more stories that remind us leadership is in our blood. Is it in yours?